Welcome to another episode of Purchase to Profits. I'm Seth Ferguson. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you don't miss our daily interviews with successful real estate investors. And I've put together the top 7 key market drivers I look at when analyzing a real estate market. Go to sethferguson.org to download your free copy. Our guest today is one of the leading crowdfunding and fintech lawyers in the United States and is an expert in capital raising and securities law. Mark Roderick joins us today. Mark, welcome to Purchase to Profits. It's great to have you on the show.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here with you.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this because what I find is the questions I get from lots of the listeners and viewers, whenever we get into, I would say, more advanced topics like crowdfunding, there's a lot of misinformation and a lot of mystery out there. So I really hope today we can really give people some solid information and facts about what crowdfunding is really all about and the challenges and advantages of it.
Okay, I really enjoy talking about crowdfunding. You will hear, your listeners will hear, I'm sort of evangelical about it. So I'm really happy to kind of be delivering good news.
All right. Well, every day is a good day for good news. So let's kick things off and tell us. Well, just tell us from a beginner perspective. So let's say somebody isn't familiar with crowdfunding at all. What is crowdfunding?
Here's the key, and your listeners of a certain age demographic will understand immediately. It's just the internet. That's the key. That's all crowdfunding is. I always say, partly tongue-in-cheek, fortunately, there are a lot of legal rules you have to comply with because otherwise you wouldn't have to hire me. But that's the tongue-in-cheek part. But it's just the internet. And you know, you are of that demographic where the internet seems very natural to you. And you think of all the things that we rely on the internet for example, this podcast. The old way of doing things was there would be seminars. So, I mean, I've spoken at a lot of old-fashioned seminars, but they're inefficient because different people are trying to get different things from seminars, and there's a big range of topics. So they tend to be very broad-based. They tend to be, frankly, not very informative. And so it's a real hit or miss if you go to a seminar, a traditional seminar, to try to learn what you are interested in. Your podcast, using the internet, overcomes that because it connects you and your guests directly, no middlemen, no seminar companies, with your listeners. And so the listeners who want to learn about a particular topic tune into your podcast and they learn about that topic. It's very efficient. That's what the internet does. So that's just one example, but you know, Amazon, the retail industry, and hotels.com and Uber and Lyft, and Match.com, sort of your generation in particular, uses the internet for everything. And in every one of those industries, the internet delivers the same thing. It delivers a direct buyer to seller connection, eliminating inefficiencies, eliminating middlemen. And so in the world of investing in private investments, it used to be you wanted to raise money for a little real estate development, and you were very limited in whom you could talk to. You know, you use your credit card, you talk to your family members, you talk to your lawyer, accountant. Who do you know? Who do you know? Very inefficient. And what the internet does, this is crowdfunding. It's all it is. It allows you as the real estate investor looking for capital to put up a website and immediately be connected with every investor in the world. Okay, that's what the internet does. I mean, that is a huge, huge deal. Just as, you know, if you're looking for a hotel in a city you're visiting, back in the day that I remember, you know, having to call hotels, you know, one after another. Do you have any availability? What's your rate? And now what do? We go on any number of websites. We see every hotel in the whole city, and they're right there. So that's all crowdfunding is. It's using the internet to directly connect investors and entrepreneurs, and drive out all the inefficiencies that have for so long been associated with capital formation in this country. That's a
Yeah.
long answer.
No, but that's a very good answer. And I always liken it to the example of now it's almost like you're reading a menu at a restaurant and you're able to choose exactly what you want from that menu instead of just
Yep.
having what did they call it? A la carte, where you just served whatever you get.
Yeah, and actually, and it's back to the internet, it's like looking for something to eat, but you're sitting at home and you're using Yelp. So you're not even limited to the menu of one restaurant. You go on Yelp. What kind of food should we have this afternoon? And you see every so do we want Italian? Do we want pizza? And that's how real estate investing now is. Okay, do we want multifamily? Do we want industrial? Sitting there from the comfort of your local, Starbucks, browsing the internet. And this is just a gigantic change from the world of only a few years ago. This is all brand new.
Yeah. And you talk about the three flavors of crowdfunding. So I guess we'll stick with the food analogy with the flavors.
Good idea. Yeah. So as I said, only partly tongue in cheek, there are a lot of rules around, a lot of legal rules around crowdfunding, all intended to protect investors. They're the securities laws. That's what the securities laws are. Bunch of laws created after the Great Depression. The Great Depression arose at least in part because the U.S. capital markets had become dysfunctional. They were, the public had no trust in the capital markets for good reason, because they were filled with fraud and abuses of the most egregious kind. So when Franklin Roosevelt was elected president in 1932, he teamed up with a congressman from Texas, and they wrote the U.S. securities laws intended to protect investors. So crowdfunding is part of those laws, the crowdfunding laws that were enacted in 2012. And they divide crowdfunding into three parts, or what I call flavors. And we call them Title II, Title III, and Title IV crowdfunding because those are just the sections of the law, sections of the Jobs Act, titles. Okay, so real quickly, and I'm not going to go on a great length about this, but Title II crowdfunding is the easiest. And Title II crowdfunding has one rule, and that is all your investors have to be accredited. And you and your listeners familiar with the term accredited? It used to mean wealthy people. You can think of it as wealthy people. It means an individual earning more than $200,000 a year, or $300,000 with a spouse, or an individual, either alone or with a spouse, having $1 million net worth without your principal residence. So back in 1982, those numbers, that's when those rules were issued, those numbers were higher in real terms than they are today. They've diminished by probably about 2/3 due to inflation, but they're still the same numbers. So anyway, Title II crowdfunding, accredited investors only. But that doesn't mean you can only advertise to accredited investors. It means you can only take checks from accredited investors. So you can advertise to anybody in any way. The internet, obviously, but radio, TV, a banner pulled behind an airplane at the New Jersey shore. And that's the only rule in Title II crowdfunding. The idea being wealthy people can protect themselves. so they don't need the arm of the government around their shoulder. So Title II crowdfunding, wild, wild west, anything goes as long as it's accredited investors only. I'm going to skip over Title III for a second to go to Title IV crowdfunding, because Title IV crowdfunding is very similar to something that we already have in securities laws. And what we already have is public offerings. You know, a company like Facebook goes public, and it involves a lot of back and forth with the SEC, a lot of regulation. Well, that's what Title IV is. It's a light, sort of public offering light. It does allow you to sell to non-accredited investors as well as accredited, but it does involve getting approval from the Securities and Exchange Commission, which is a 4, 5, 6 month process, relatively expensive because you have to, again, pay someone like me.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't do Title IV, which is also called Regulation A. You don't do Title IV for a little deal. You do it either for one big deal, or more popularly, you do it when you're creating a fund. You want to, you're going to do 10 or 15 or 20 $2 million deals.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, so that's Title IV. It's like a mini public offering. Title III is a very unusual character. It's brand new. It allows you to sell to non-accredited investors in small amounts, with no SEC approval. And because the SEC is not, putting its arm around the shoulders of the poor widows and orphans, Title III is very limited. There are lots of rules, because when Congress created and passed the law, a lot of people were genuinely afraid that the widows and orphans were going to be abused by people like you and me.
That's right.
That you'd have a podcast, How to Abuse Widows and Orphans. So there are lots of restrictions built in. One, you can only raise $1 million per year. And that means in all of your projects, like if you're doing 5 projects, the $1 million limit applies to them cumulatively, not individually. And then the amount each investor can invest is really limited. It's really small, to make sure that those widows and orphans, if you steal from them, you can't steal very much. And there's tons of other rules and regulations around Title III. So those are the 3 the flavors. Title II, Wild Wild West, accredited investors only. Title IV, like a mini public offering. Title III, this unusual creature subject to a bunch of restrictions. And that's it. And in the real world, Title II crowdfunding is by far the most successful, followed by Title IV. And Title III is just kind of creaking along. It has not developed really to be anything close to what some of us hoped when the law was passed.
Yeah, well, it just seems, you have the cost that would be prohibitive if you're capped at $1 million. $1 million doesn't really do much for you when you're doing some larger real estate deals.
And particularly in real estate, that $1 million cap is $1 million per year. So even $1 million for one deal is not a lot, but it's not very much money. And because there's not much very money involved, no one can make money in Title III. And if no one can make money, what you end up seeing is a lot of shoddy work. So if you go on the Title III sites, there have been successful. I have a bunch of Title III portals as clients that are producing good deals. But if you look at the high volume sites in Title III, you see a lot of poorly done, not very attractive companies and poorly done work, unfortunately.
Yeah. And so what sort of, there's the advantage of getting the word out there and being able to take funds if you're using a Title II. What other advantages are you seeing? Like, why are people gravitating towards the crowdfunding method?
Well, as you know, in the real estate world in particularly, but the world of entrepreneurs generally, I mean, capital is king. That's why they
Mhm.
call it. We have a capitalist economic system, and some people don't appreciate what that means early on in their careers, but they eventually find out that the folks with the capital make the rules, sort
Mhm.
of. That's how the system works. So anytime you can, as an entrepreneur, have access to big pools of capital, that is going to be attractive. Now, the crowd can be a particularly attractive source of capital because, um, unlike other alternatives, alternative capital sources like private equity firms, professional investors drive very, very tough deals. Um, the crowd doesn't drive deals that are as tough as professional investors. The crowd doesn't expect quite as much of a return, and the crowd doesn't exert quite as much control. And of course, the reason is because the crowd, until now, has had very few investing options. You can invest in a Vanguard index fund, very, very exciting. And meanwhile, all the great investments have been reserved to the ultra wealthy in this country, the private equity funds. So with the crowd coming into the game, the crowd, given the alternatives, is willing to settle. For the crowd, these are great deals that are being offered, even if the deals are not what a private equity firm would typically get. So you've got, millions of people and trillions of dollars of potential capital now flowing into the market. And yeah, those people who have grown used to the thin gruel of Wall Street investing, they are eager to become involved in these, real estate deals.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Thin gruel. I might steal that one day.
Be my guest. I didn't make it up. I think that's from Charles Dickens or
Yeah.
something.
So let's say I'm an operator and I want to start raising capital using crowdfunding. What sort of liability should I be aware of with this model?
Well, I'm just going to make a joke, and I'll tell you it's a joke before I say it, so you're not. First, try on some orange clothes and see how you look. Now, see, I just wanted to say that was a joke first. The fact is there is no additional liability of taking money from the crowd, and in some ways there's less liability. Now, just to be perfectly clear, anytime you take money from other people, we use other people's money, OPM, you are taking on liability. Um, if things are done right, and that really means having a lawyer who knows what he or she is doing, if things are done right, and you do your best, you don't cheat, you don't steal, you don't lie, you really should have no personal liability. That's plain and simple how it should work. However, when people lose money, they tend not to be happy. So sometimes they sue you. There is no greater liability and probably less liability of being sued by the crowd than there is being sued by, again, one of those private equity firms. The private equity guys, they're almost always guys, are, they're sharks. They're tough. And they've probably built into their documents the ability to do bad things to you if they lose money. So in my opinion, dealing with the crowd entails less liability exposure, certainly doesn't entail more, but all of that is premised on doing it right. Meaning, yeah, having a lawyer who knows what he or she is doing to protect you.
Yeah. Well, the crowdfunding model to me is very exciting because not only is the consumer, the individual investor getting a better selection, they're getting better, better knowledge, better exposure to all their opportunities. It's also a lot more cost effective for the sponsor, for the capital raiser to go out and source that capital.
It absolutely is. And why? It's just the internet. Why does hotels.com work? Why does Uber work? It's all the same. It's the same economics. I mean, the words on the balance sheet and the income statement might be different as between two different industries, but the big economic forces at play that cause crowdfunding to be more economically efficient than private capital raising, they're the same things that cause hotels.com to be successful. It's scale, efficiencies, eliminating middlemen, and access to information. As you say, now the individual investor has access to all these different deals and can pick and choose and make good economic choices. So, yeah, it's terrific. And of course, I would say it's the future. It is already, the scale of the deals being done has grown immensely, and it's just going to continue because it's just the internet. Back in the day, in the 1990s, I was probably, well, I think I might have been the first lawyer in the world to use email because I was representing some high-tech companies, and I remember when, email was like, what's this? And then I was probably one of the first people to make travel plans on Expedia, but now, of course, you just do it automatically. And I think that is how crowdfunding will work too. If you're a real estate person, you're looking for money, first place you're going to go online.
Yeah.
Because it's just the internet, and that's what the internet does.
Yeah. So let's say I am an operator looking to raise capital. What sort of steps should I start taking now to prepare myself for a successful crowdfunding?
Well, it's actually pretty straightforward. So on the legal side, you want to structure the deal so that it is appropriate for crowdfunding. And I don't want to pretend that it is rocket surgery to do that, but there's some stuff that you want to do to structure your deal appropriately. Even the state, you probably want to use a Delaware LLC because that's what everyone is used to. You want to have the right documents in place. But crowdfunding is a marketing business, right? Because all those investors out there, as we were just saying, they have a choice of a lot of menu choices these days.
Yeah.
So you need to make your deal attractive. And that, of course, that partly means making sure it's professionally done and the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. I always get those mixed up. But you're probably want a practical level, have an investor deck, a nice shiny PowerPoint presentation that you will feel comfortable, posting on your website. And it has to be good because you are competing with all the other operators out there.
Yeah. And you were bang on when you said it is a large part marketing. I think one of the highest profile people right now in real estate would be Grant Cardone. And, with his Reggae offering, when was that? Was that last year? He's making a big splash in the space and taking full advantage of everything funding has to offer.
Yes, and you do see it. I have been saying since inception, crowdfunding is a marketing business. It's not The legal part is a little part. The technology part is a little part. The marketing part is the big part,
Yep.
because there are not just a lot of real estate sites out there. I mean, there's like 1 billion websites out there, and they have pretty pictures and vacations and, pictures of puppies and kittens and baby whales, and you got to get people to come to your site, and that's not so easy.
Yeah, no, for sure. So, Mark, this has been great, really informative, and I'm sure lots of the listeners and viewers are on the right track when it comes to crowdfunding. So, if somebody wants to reach out, maybe get some advice, learn more about what you do, where can they find you?
Well, my blog is always the best place to start, and the URL. Well, if you just typed Mark Roderick crowdfunding, you'd find me. But the URL of the blog is crowdfundattny.com. So
Perfect.
crowdfund and then the abbreviation for attorney. Crowdfundattny.com, that's the blog. And from there, my contact information. But shoot me an email. You can try to call, but chances are I'll be on another call or something. So send me an email. That's the best way to get a hold of me.
That sounds great. Well, Mark, just want to say thanks so much for taking the time and sharing this very valuable information with us.
Thank you very much. I've enjoyed every minute of it.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. And to you, our viewers, I wish you well on your journey from purchase to profits. See you next time.